Croft reported in November of 2009, end-of-life health care may prolong life, but the cost of doing that may also bankrupt the country.
With end-of-life care, there are also delicate cultural and political considerations. Patients with their family's support want to cling to life, and it is often easier to hope for medical miracles than to discuss how they want to die.
Hey, Charlie, I want you to meet somebody. How you doing?
When we met Charlie Haggard, he was 68 years old and suffering from liver and kidney failure. He wanted a double transplant, which would cost about $450,000. But doctors told him he was currently too weak to be a candidate for the procedure. At a meeting with Charlie's family and his doctors, Dr. Byock raised the awkward question of what should be done if Charlie got worse and his heart or lungs failed. Dr. Byock told him that resuscitation rarely works on someone in Charlie's condition and that it could lead to a drawn-out death in the ICU.
Either way you decide, we will honor your choice, and that's the truth. Should we do CPR if your heart were to suddenly stop?
Yes.
You'd be okay with being in the ICU again?
Yes.
I know it's an awkward conversation.
And beat second place.
You don't think it makes any sense?
It wouldn't be my choice. It's not what I advise people. At the present time, it's their right to request it.
And Medicare has to pay.
And Medicare pays for it.
Charlie Haggard died a few months later. A family member told us his condition had deteriorated so much they decided to let him go peacefully. But when it comes to expensive, high-tech treatment with some potential to extend life, there are few restrictions. By law, Medicare cannot reject any treatment based upon cost. It will pay $40,000 for a 93-year-old man with terminal cancer to get a surgically implanted defibrillator if he happens to have heart problems, too.
I think you cannot make these decisions on a case-by-case basis. It would be much easier for us to say we simply do not put defibrillators into people in this condition, meaning your age, your functional status, the ability to make full benefit of the defibrillator. Now, that's going to outrage a lot of people. And
But you think that should happen?
I think at some point it has to happen.
Well, this is a version then of pulling grandma off the machine.
You know, I have to say, I think that's offensive. I mean, I spend my life in service of affirming life. I really do. And to say we're going to pull grandma off the machine by not offering a liver transplant or her fourth cardiac bypass surgery or something is really just scurrilous. And it's certainly scurrilous when we have 46 million Americans who are uninsured.
Every other major industrialized nation but the United States has a budget for how much taxpayer funds are allocated to health care because they've all recognized that you could bankrupt your country without it.
So you're talking about rationing?
Listen, we ration now, we just don't ration rationally. There's no question that there's going to have to be some form of rationing. Let me be clear. Individuals and employers ought to be able to spend as much money as they want to have things done. But when you're talking about taxpayer resources, there's a limit as to how much resources we have.
But if recent history is any guide, rationing has become the third rail of American politics, even though Dr. Elliot Fisher says we already limit health care based on income and whether people have insurance. After analyzing Medicare records for end-of-life treatment, he's convinced that there is so much waste in the present system that if it were eliminated, there'd be no need to ration beneficial care to anyone. Multiple studies have concluded that most patients and their families are not even familiar with end-of-life options and things like living wills, home hospice, and pain management.
And the real problem is that many of the patients who are being treated aggressively, if you ask them, they would prefer less aggressive care. They would prefer to be cared for at home. They'd prefer to go to hospice if they were given a choice, but we don't adequately give them a choice.
At some point, most doctors know that a patient's not likely to get better.
Absolutely.
And after you've run through all the choices, then...
Sometimes there's a good conversation. Often there's not. You know, patients are left alone to sort of figure it out themselves.
Marcia Klisch might have lingered for quite some time in the intensive care unit at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, but Dr. Byock and his team had a number of meetings with her closest friend, Barbara Mention. She said Klisch would not want to be kept alive on machines if there was no meaningful hope of recovery. It was decided the doctors would not try to resuscitate her if her condition worsened, which it soon did.
Her heart has just flipped into a rhythm that doesn't allow it to beat effectively.
She died a few moments later.
This is a hard time in human life, but it's just a part of life. Collectively, as a culture, we really have to acknowledge that we're mortal, get over it, and start looking at what a healthy, morally robust way for people to die looks like.
In March of 2010, President Obama signed into law the much-debated health care reform legislation. The intent of the law is to slow the growth of Medicare expenses, but none of the end-of-life issues raised in our story are addressed in the new law. In fact, the new legislation actually reduces Medicare payments for hospice programs, which studies have shown are very cost-efficient. Our next story involves